We have some breaking news. Let's get straight to our Paula Reed. And Paula, we understand that Jack Smith, special counsel, has weighed in on the status of one of Trump's cases. What can you tell us?
That's right. Special counsel Jack Smith is saying that he is going to move to dismiss one of the two criminal cases against President-elect Trump. Here, he is referring to the election subversion case that he filed against President-elect Trump roughly 2 years ago. He is saying that, quote, the country has never faced the circumstances here where you have a pending criminal case against a president-elect. There is internal Justice Department guidance that says you cannot indict or prosecute a sitting president. And here, Jack Smith saying that, quote, this also applies to this situation where you have a president-elect. So he is moving to dismiss the election subversion case against Trump. Now, of course, Trump is facing two federal cases, both brought by the special counsel Jack Smith, this election subversion case, and then also the classified documents case down in Mar-a-Lago. Now, we've reported that the Justice Department and the special counsel's office have been in conversations about exactly how they want to wind down these cases. Now, we have not heard specifically about the Mar-a-Lago documents case yet. That is a little more complicated in terms of winding down because, of course, Trump has two co-defendants there who are not presidents-elect. So we'll be watching to see what the special counsel does here. But in terms of the special counsel's case against Trump related to January 6th and his alleged efforts to interfere with the outcome of the 2020 election, here Jack Smith asking to dismiss this case. Now, this is not a big surprise. A short time ago, a couple weeks ago, Smith has asked the court for more time to, quote, assess the unprecedented circumstances of having a pending case against a president-elect. And they asked the court for more time to assess what they should do. And again, not a huge surprise that they were going to ask to dismiss this case because the president-elect has made it clear. Once he's in office, he intends to fire Smith and get rid of his entire office. It was also expected he would get rid of the two cases against him. He can do that as president. He can have his attorney general fire the special counsel, dismiss cases. But here it looks like Jack Smith trying to beat him to it and asking for this case to be dismissed. And we're watching and waiting to see if we get a similar filing related to that other federal case pending against the president-elect down in Florida related to the alleged mishandling of classified documents.
Paula, as you said, these filings not coming as a surprise given that Donald Trump won the 2024 election. But stepping back, put this into context for us more broadly, because this is the closure of one of the most significant chapters of the legal woes that Trump has faced. These charges were filed more than a year and a half ago, and a lot of work went into this.
Yeah, I mean, this must be devastating for the special counsel, Jack Smith. He was brought in to handle these two cases. But the fact is that there is internal Justice Department guidance that says that you cannot indict or prosecute a sitting president. And they had to discuss with the leadership of the Justice Department, well, what do you do with a pending case against a president-elect? And a source familiar with this thinking tells me, look, Smith is a rules guy. He wants to follow the procedures, the practices of the Justice Department, which is why he is moving to dismiss this case. Now, what's also interesting about this case is this is the case where the Supreme Court had to answer the question of whether the former president at that time, former President Trump, had any immunity to shield him from some of the charges in this case, because his lawyers argued that some of the allegations were related to his official conduct. And the Supreme Court took roughly 7 months to weigh in on that question. And of course, they did rule that he had some immunity to protect him from prosecution. But if the Supreme Court had weighed in when Jack Smith initially asked them roughly a year ago, last December, it is possible that the special counsel could have had time to bring some case, depending on what would remain after the Supreme Court's analysis. But the Supreme Court, again, waiting 7 months to reveal the answer to that question, making it virtually impossible that the special counsel could bring this case. And this was really the only federal case that they could have realistically brought against Trump before the November election. Even people on both sides of the aisle have told me that the classified documents case was going to take longer, no matter who the judge was. But again, the special counsel definitely hindered by the Supreme Court taking so long here. But look, the Trump lawyers, they also deserve credit. They have very aggressively litigated on behalf of their client pretty much every conceivable constitutional claim that he could make. They have made it, and they were successful even beyond their expectations with the immunity argument at the Supreme Court. But once he became president-elect, they made it clear they were going to press to have all of these cases tossed out. And if they weren't, Trump was going to have his attorney general do it once he or she got into office. So this is not a huge surprise. The special counsel moving to dismiss this historic case.
All right, Paula Reed, thank you so much.
Yeah, please stand by, Paula. We want to discuss this and more with Democratic Congressman Dan Goldman of New York. He sits on the House Homeland Security Committee. Congressman, thank you so much for being with us. Just right off the bat, your reaction to Jack Smith announcing that he will file to dismiss the charges in the election subversion case against former President Trump.
Well, look, I certainly understand why he did it, given the Department of Justice policy that you cannot prosecute a sitting president. I think it is a shame for justice in this country. It establishes that Donald Trump is above the law. The Supreme Court put him above the law in that opinion that Paula just mentioned. But now he appears to escape full accountability for what were crimes charged by a grand jury. And I would just add one other thing that we ought to pay close attention to. We cannot normalize the fact that Donald Trump, as the president-elect, should not be held accountable for crimes that he committed before. If he were to have fired the special counsel, that would be a gross abdication of the independence of the Department of Justice. And if the shoe were on the other foot, for example, and Joe Biden were to have fired David Weiss, who clearly had a politicized investigation because the House Republicans effectively scuttled a plea agreement, everyone would be up in arms. So let's make sure that we don't normalize Donald Trump's political partisan behavior that has no place under our rule of law.
Congressman, you know that the American people were well aware of the charges that Donald Trump was facing in this case and several others. What do you make of the argument that they essentially served as a jury, and by re-electing him and now making him president-elect, they have weighed in on these matters?
I don't give any credence to that argument. I think what was very clear is that people voted for Donald Trump because they thought that he was going to improve the lives of the middle class, and perhaps in addition that he would secure the border. They did not vote for him to dismantle our democracy, to attack the Constitution, to politicize all of our agencies, and certainly not as a referendum on his criminal cases. Those cases should have been played out in a court of law. I believe the Attorney General should have started the investigation a lot earlier. I believe the Supreme Court should have moved much quicker in its opinion. And Donald Trump should not have been able to run out the clock on these charges. But I certainly don't think anything that came from the election was a reflection of support for Donald Trump getting rid of these cases, largely because the American people, as you and I, as well, we don't know what the actual evidence is.
I mean, I imagine that a lot of voters had to know that those cases would go away if he were president, given what you said about the Supreme Court's ruling on immunity. That doesn't change the way you think about this at all? The fact that voters must have known that he wasn't going to prison or to be convicted of some of these crimes if he was going to be elected?
Well, look, I think ultimately the majority of voters who voted for Donald Trump decided that, what they're dealing with in their day-to-day lives, understandably matters a lot more than what's going on in a criminal court with Donald Trump. I think it's sad. I think it should be disqualifying, but I certainly understand why people are more focused on their price of groceries, on their job prospects, on the affordability crisis. But I do expect, Boris, that the special counsel will release a very detailed and exhaustive report outlining all of his evidence. That is the ordinary course for a special counsel when they wind down. And I would expect that the special counsel will do that before he leaves office.
And Congressman, before we let you go, I have to ask you about this. You recently introduced a resolution to clarify the Constitution's two-term limit for presidents. Do you think that there's a serious push among Republicans to change federal law to allow Trump to run in 2028?
Well, let me just give you the example that I just mentioned, which is that it appears to have been completely normalized that Donald Trump could either pardon himself or dismiss criminal charges against him if he becomes president. At one point, that was anathema, and everyone was like, oh my God, that's crazy. That can't possibly be. It's the same thing now. This is how Donald Trump operates. He floats it, he normalizes it, and then it just becomes part of the common parlance. And so we wanted to lay down a marker to say, and put everyone on record, Republicans included, that the Constitution is very clear that he cannot serve another term. And what my fear is that with him floating that, with some of his cabinet picks, which clearly are prioritizing political loyalists, that Donald Trump is well on his way to dismantling our government and the way that it operates. And we and Congress, the Republicans especially in the Senate, need to be a check and balance to ensure that our government continues to function for the people, not for Elon Musk and other billionaires.
Congressman Dan Goldman, we have to leave the conversation there. Appreciate you joining us, sir.